Oh yes, I'm using my wife's computer, so let me sign in here. So it's going to launch my presentation, and upon launching, what it's going to do is it's going to give a code. So this is where I am unfamiliar with how it's going to work with how I want to do this, but we're going to try it. So for those of you that are at home, all you need to be able to do is hear me. So you can open up a new tab. You don't need to be able to really see anything for a second. So if I could get you to open up a new tab, and in your browser, type in joinpd.com. So I'll give you a second to do that, which is basically joinpeardeck.com. And then there is a code here. So if you type in that code, and they give a lovely little, what do you call that, anagram for it. So I'll just give a few seconds here for, so what you can see, so from the teacher point of view, looking down at the bottom, you can see how many students have actually connected. So then you know if all the students in your class have actually successfully connected or not. You can also open up a teacher dashboard, which actually shows the names of all of the students. So, you know, if you're missing someone, you can open up that dashboard and figure out who it is that you're missing. And I mean, this just becomes a habit of when we're doing these presentations, you know, usually before class actually starts, I've already opened up my Google Meet, and this is already at the beginning of my Google Meet. So when my students join the classroom, it's all, hi, how are you? Pleasantries, but join this so we can get started. So I'm going to, so we've had a lot of people connect, so I can see that I have 19 students connected here. I'm going to start the class. So when I start the class, now in that tab that you opened up, Pear Deck, everybody should see the PowerPoint like usual. And now I'm in control. So I'm going to, I can advance the slides. However, when I advance the slides, this first slide that I made was a Pear Deck slide that I'm going to talk about in a second, but it's basically a multiple choice slide. So what you should be seeing is you should be seeing a question. What platform do you create your presentations in, as well as some options for you to answer. So if you could take a second and answer that question. And one of the things that I can do is, from my perspective, I can, and I'm going to show you all this within the PowerPoint in a second, but I can see the responses as they come in. So I get an idea of, so I can see that the majority, oh, it's like the presidential election right now, it's changing rapidly. I can see that the majority of you are using Microsoft PowerPoint, with some of you using Google Slides. So if you know, this is kind of one of the things just to bounce back and forth so you can see what the teacher point of view looks like. So if you come to my screen, back to the Zoom for a second, you can see that in my screen, I have the responses. So I can see that the bulk of the students are doing PowerPoint, or the bulk of you do your presentations in PowerPoint, and some of you do it in Google Slides. And then I can hide those responses and go back to the PowerPoint slide. So if you go back to your Pear Deck slide, there's one more question I have for you, which is, have you used any of the following? So have you used Pear Deck and or Jamboard, or you haven't used any of them? So I'll just wait a second here till the responses fill in. So it looks like we've got a small percentage that has used Jamboard, a few people that have used Pear Deck, and even fewer that have used both, and the majority that have used none of them, which is kind of good to see. That means my thing's not going to be completely useless here. So so thank you very much for doing that. If you go back to the Zoom meeting now, I just wanted to give you an idea of what Pear Deck look like from the student's perspective. So when you create these Pear Decks, you're just going to make a slide, and you just make the slides like you normally do. So when I made this slide here, I just put the question in, and then along the side here, I just selected multiple choice. And then what it does is it prompts you to put in options. You put in the options, and then you see the student, what you saw where you put in your answers, that's what the students see. So the students don't just see this slide, they see this slide with the options. And one of the places, and there are, there's more than one, there's lots of different things you can do. There's even more if your board has a paid subscription. There's draw options, there's drag options and all that stuff. But the freebies are, you can ask questions that are text, multiple choice, you can ask for a number answer, or you could ask to like get directed to a website. And it's very self-explanatory. As far as some of the teacher superpowers go, when at the bottom of the screen, these are the three main things that you see from the teacher's perspective. The one that I was showing you earlier was the show responses. We can see the responses that the students asked to a question. You can lock the screens, which means that you stop accepting responses at a certain point. And if the conversation is driving, you can prompt a new response. So you can, on the fly, add in a question that you would be interested in polling the students on. One of the places where I use Pear Deck the most is just with simple concept checks. So we're working through, the students are working collaboratively with their group mates. We're about halfway through the lesson. I'll throw up a concept check to the Pear Deck and I'll have them answer. So if you don't have to do it for the sake of time, but this one right here is also a Pear Deck slide. And you can see that I give the question. And if you're in the Pear Deck screen, you would see options that the students would see. So that's one of the things that I use. The other one that I use is Jamboard. And Jamboard is basically a virtual whiteboard. And so if you take a second, I guess you really can't click here, can you? No, you can't. So I'll just show you what it looks like.
Adam, just a few minutes left.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just show you quickly what it looks like. So what I do is Jamboard is really, it's just another web-based app. I share it and I just put the link inside of the chat box in my Google Meet or whatever. And I like to use Jamboard as a way to do peer instruction. So the way that it works in my class is I have the students divided up into groups. They're divided up into groups, so I have cohort A and B, and those are the ones that flop back and forth between face-to-face and virtual. And I also have cohort D. This quadmester, by just some grace of God, I happen to have exactly 7 in each thing. So what I've done is I've paired a cohort A with a cohort B with a cohort D. So each group has a cohort A, cohort B, cohort D. And I make their own Google Meet. So, at the beginning of class, I go, okay, break into your groups. They would go into the Google Meet, break into their groups. And the way that I use the Jamboard is when it does come to peer instruction, because one of the big things about peer instruction is you want to give time for the students to explain their answers. But doing it in the big forum of the entire class can be a little bit intimidating. So having it with only 3 students, what I do is I have 7 groups. So I put the exact same question on 7 different slides, but I just go with it by group. So if you're group 7, you're only allowed to touch this slide. And I have them record using these little sticky notes here. They can just click on a sticky note. They can type in, wow, this is awesome. And they can post that, but they would be putting in their physics ideas. Okay. So they put in all of their ideas here, they record their ideas, they come up with an answer, but they have to have their justified answer. And then we come back as a class and we scroll through the slides and we see if all the groups agree or disagree. If there's a disagreement, then let's say group 3 says answer 2. Well, I'll give group 3 2 minutes to explain their answer. I'll give group 4 who said answer 1 2 minutes to explain their answer. And then we see if we can convince each other who's correct, and then we do the final answer. So I find Jamboard a very good way to bring in interaction as well. Just real quick before I wrap it up, and this will all be shared with you through the OAPT newsletter, which you should absolutely sign up for. There's going to be an article about all of our presentations. So you will get access to this link through there. I put in here a resource. So if you click on that link when you have access to the presentation, there's a list of a whole bunch of different online simulators that I use, as well as online multiple choice question banks that are very, very good for creating the peer instruction. So I will stop there. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, so I can now see the chat box, so I'm going to go and just answer a few questions here.
Adam, there's just the one about, is there a maximum number of students? And then
there is not a maximum. I should say I have never met the maximum. So I only have the free account, and I've had up to 30 students on it at one time, and it has never balked at me for having that many.
And then the other question just asked about the importing of PDF or Word documents into, I'm assuming, Jamboard there.
I usually, the way that I always do it is so if I had a PDF open, I would just take like a snippet of the question, and then I just copy and paste that to the Jamboard. Because I mean, the Jamboard is kind of meant to be a very interactive thing. So I only post the question, and then they use the sticky notes and the text boxes to help to just keep like a running documentation of their thought process. Of course it's not, it's Mac. All right, so thank you very much, everybody. I am going to turn it over to Rachelle, who is our next presenter.
Sorry, Rachelle, just 1 second. Carolyn,
okay.
To answer your question, there's no limits to the number of participants who can join a session in Pear Deck. I just Googled it.
Oh,
so,
sweet. Excellent.
700 is a go.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachelle Frederick. I'm the Science Department Head from St. Andre Bassett in London, Ontario. I am talking about assessment and evaluation. I'm just going to go right to my PowerPoint. Hang on. Did I lose you there for my share screen? Here we go. I chose this because a lot of us are finding right now we don't have a lot of time to do assessment and evaluation. In fact, our principal has flat out told us to avoid tests as much as possible and to be creative in how we assess our students this year. So I have been doing this for years. So, no. Okay, so our goal is to leave this session with ideas that incorporate more observations and conversations into our assessment and evaluation strategies by discussing rubrics and other tools that we can use to improve student learning even with reduced contact time. This is what we call a one-sentence lesson plan, and I use these whenever I'm planning my 10 face-to-face days. The nature of the students that I'm teaching, equity of online use is huge, a rural area, so I have to cram as much as I can into those 10 classes. So they will be able to accomplish this by using this so that they will be helped in this way, the X, Y, Z. And that helps me focus my assessment and evaluation. This is just gobbledygook from Growing Success, just to maintain some professionalism there, as well as the difference between assessment and evaluation. We are being directed at the school I'm at to focus on the overall expectations. So our principal does not want us to have like tons and tons of marks, but he does want us to have meaningful tasks for the kids to do. So that's why I've been focusing on observations and conversations. This is something that originated out of the fact that I'm a brain injury survivor and I have difficulty reading. And so I've had to go more to assessing the kids this way because literally trying to mark a lot of tests and lab reports and stuff makes me literally ill. So I like it because I get a lot more engagement from the students when they're doing collaborative tools, collaborative learning and everything else. And it also gives us multiple sources of data. Okay, one of the things I do is bell work. So when the kids come in every day, especially in the 3U physics, where it's not the physics they struggle with, it's the math, I will often put D equals V1 t plus the 1/2 at squared. I haven't even introduced vectors or anything, but have them isolate a on the left side of the equation. That'll tell you pretty quickly how well, and you can walk around the classroom and see that, who's going to be struggling right off the bat. I do a lot of observational stuff with lab equipment. So in the physics classroom, that could be how accurately they're reading some of the tools, whereas in the grade 9 and 10, it's do they know how to use a balance? Do they know how to read the graduated cylinder? Or even when they're using the lab benches and optics, how are they reading the rulers and such like that to find the focal points? Performance tasks. And then with collaborative learning, I use whiteboards a lot, and then flip letters. And I got that from an OAPT summer camp many years ago. I don't know if Chris was the one who might have introduced that, or if it was from Roberta or Dave. Anyways, and then I use Rally Table and Rally Robin. But the biggest thing I use is actually this little green book in the left. I have a whole notebook, and I literally take notes the whole time I'm in class. And here's my whiteboards and markers. For those of you who may be in a budgetarily constrained school, you can make your own cheater whiteboards using page protectors and cardstock. And if you go to your head administrator who's in charge of the budget and does all the ordering, who in my case is female, she will tell you that the price for whiteboard markers is not very expensive when you order it through the school. But I just want to talk about the notebook. I use this a lot, and I thought I had some pages. I guess I'll skip to those. I'll get to those. But I also use something called single point rubrics, because the hardest thing I found that teachers have in secondary, we feel like we have to have something to track. So I use what is called a single point rubric, where I only put the level 3 success criteria, and they either have to work on it on the left or you exceeded because of the right. So this is one that I will be using with my class next week when we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of finishing I'm in an octomester, so one course at a time for 4 weeks. So the kids will do this sort of thing. They have to be able to do this. So if you see a student not use equipment correctly, you'd note that. But from the physics perspective, or even the chemistry, walking around and talking to the students, you're also going to be able to assess them conversationally. Can they use the vocabulary easily? Can they explain why? The key question is, why am I doing this? Okay. And I do use quizzes. I don't know if the whole province is using Brightspace, but I use Brightspace for anything that's an actual test. And I usually divide it up into that stuff which marks automatically, like the matching, multiple choice, true or false. And then the short answer or something I have is a different test, so that I can give the kids immediate feedback on what they've been doing without it straining me too much. But I just want to show you here. These are some of the things that when I'm going around to the kids. So the picture of the kid with the nails and the graduated cylinder, I go and I have her explain to me, how are you using this? Like, is she able to use the word meniscus and such like this? The middle upper is a foldable note. So I have the kids explain to me what that means. And then here's me trying to teach the kids the difference between ionic and molecular using the whiteboard so I can see it. And then frog dissection and using the diaper. So the diaper is actually a very easy lab that I do with my kids for prediction. And what you see here is actually a portfolio that I'm using. That's my main thing that I'm changing this year. The kids are taking pictures every day and then put together a top 10 list and have to explain to me why they selected this, what did they learn from it, how is it going to impact their use of science in the future. This particular student, again, the diaper and the frog, and then the ubiquitous cabbage juice lab. I thought I had some pictures of my actual notes from my green workbook, but I did not. But I literally, when I'm doing this, I take my observations by groups. So I just put the 4 team members' names, and as I'm talking to each of them, I just go through and keep notes. So they know they're not allowed to use their phone for unnecessary things. Taking pictures of what they're doing, great. Snapchatting their friend in class, not so great. That, or if you're wandering around, and this is even pre-COVID, wandering around and trying to just wandering around. It's a safety issue. You might interrupt with somebody else's measurements. And with COVID, it's the whole contagious thing. I do, I'm trying to think what else I have. I have provided some links. My favorite site right now is Cult of Pedagogy. And she talks a lot about the single point rubrics and the one sentence lesson plan, and then Kagan's collaborative learning structures. And I also have provided a, can you see that? Just here's my Word documents with my single point rubrics. And then I also use, for those things that I do mark, especially when I'm teaching physics and chemistry, I use a lot of short forms to provide descriptive feedback without having to write a lot. So ignored instructions is a common one. ME is a mechanical error. So especially when they're doing those vector problems in physics and they make one little error with respect to direction, but they get the rest of the thing, the rest of the question right, I'd put ME. And then if they got the rest of it, I'd give them a C. So they know that what they did was still correct. But, and then there's just a whole bunch of little things here. And I've used this for years. And then the last one is because this is assessment and evaluation, I try to always have my kids do their own learning skills and work habits. But the key thing that works for me is 3 things the students do well. They have to do this. 3 things I need to improve: tasks and assignments I like doing, and tasks and assignments I did not like doing. By taking 5 minutes and having my students do this, it makes writing report cards that are very personalized very much easier. So basically, that's it. I hope somebody learns something that'll save them time marking, because that's ultimately what this was about: how not to kill yourself when we've got limited time. And how do I stop sharing? There we go.
Rachelle, the only question just was, do you happen to have a copy of the notebook at home with you? Because then you could just hold it up for us to show us. But
I don't actually bring it home, because nothing gets marked at home. I have very clear boundaries. So I will be at school at 7 a.m. when the door unlocks, and instead of bringing home and staying till 4 o'clock when they lock the door at the end, rather than bringing stuff home. Otherwise, no, I don't have any. I don't think I even have any pictures of it. Let me see.
no worries.
Hang on. Okay, yep, I've got a picture. I just have to put it to the right orientation so that you can see it.
You'll have to share your screen again.
Yep, I had to find it first. Okay, so here's an example. This was a shampoo lab I did with the
Could you zoom in on it?
Yep. Okay. So what you see is OUT is outstanding use of time. GUT is good use of time. EOT is excellent use of time. No clue about volume or beakers. No idea of fair test. Not prepared with a test with a pencil. Test for ink. So those are just notes that I jot down when I'm taking them. And then when I actually do fill out their rubric, it provides the feedback for them. So use graduated cylinder instead of beaker to make 10%. They tried to make a 10% solution in a graduated cylinder instead of a beaker. And then lots of trouble following instructions, wandering, didn't bring pen, didn't do oil test, didn't read instructions carefully regarding dilution versus non-diluted. So those are the kind of notes, and these are the notations that I've developed over the years to make it easier for me to do. Okay, I have a feeling maybe that OUT was not outstanding use of time. PUT is poor use of time. And so when the kids do tank, I can say, you know what, this is what happened on this day. Does that help you at all, Chris? I know you said you want, can you?
That looked great. Thank you.
Okay. So, okay, that's it. It's, I guess, who's on next?
That's me.
Okay.
Sorry for dropping my Chromebook on everybody there. I had to run over and plug it in quick because my plug that I plugged in didn't work.
Carolyn, is Carolyn clapping or is she raising her hand?
Good question. I can't see Carolyn.
Okay.
She's clapping. Okay, perfect. All right, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about hands-on learning in a virtual classroom. So for me, in the last couple of years, I've really pushed over into online, hands-on stuff, because for me, a lot of students come in with misconceptions about how the world works, and I want to correct those misconceptions. And they can just like trust me blindly, but they won't actually believe it or change how they think the world works unless they actually like do the physics and actually have some hands-on experience from it. So I've pushed really hard into the hands-on stuff in the last couple of years. And then when we went into emergency online learning, I was like, well, how am I going to keep it hands-on? So my little thing today is just a couple of minutes about stuff that you can use to help enhance your online stuff and get going. So there's kind of two reasons why I went in this direction. One was because I found that virtual general, I mean, we're covered with like filters. People are like going online to like augment or enjoy a virtual reality. So if I assign you like a PhET simulation or something, students will just automatically assume that that's an altered version of reality and isn't actually a true reflection of how the world works. So I wanted something in addition to like a PhET simulation for my online kids. And I also wanted to do it so that they could do it with just stuff they had at home. So for example, I recreated the pendulum lab by hanging, like you can use a belt from your like house coat, hang it in your closet, and then hang like an orange or a ball of socks or something from the bottom, and then use the pendulum lab. And so a lot of our labs we do in classes, you can actually do at home with just random stuff you find, as long as you just kind of let go on the accuracy. So if you focus on labs for trends, and just like if I increase my mass, like if it's heavier versus lighter, faster versus slower, and get a concept of like how the world works in trends, and the kids can play, and then you send them into the PhET simulation after to have like good data to back up what they're talking about, then it helps like make those connections. You can also do demos with good stuff in class and things like that after, but I just kind of wanted to let the kids play. So a couple of things that I have included. So this last year, we didn't have the opportunity to. This year, I sent them all home with a Ziploc bag. So I start teaching physics next quad. So I delivered them today so that they're ready to go for the 16th. So I had a Ziploc bag that I delivered to all the kids in my class. And I basically said, here's everything you should need to be able to do hands-on labs at home, take it home with you and use it. So a couple of things or hacks that I have included in that is I love Jamboard, but I also wanted like actual whiteboards at home because there's something about a non-permanent surface. So Rachelle, my cheap hack is actually white books. Make these little like whiteboard books, and then they're like $5 a piece, and then I just cut them in half, and then each kid gets like a little like whiteboard to use at home. So that's a really easy cheap hack if you need them at home or if you want to use them in class and you don't have the money for that. If you're using them in class, whiteboard or Whitebooks does like huge chart paper, which is the ones that I always use. And so they're massive chart papers, and you get 10 for $60. So then they're like cover the size of your desk. So they're awesome for using during labs and things like that too, when you're back in the classroom. I scrounged my classroom for chalk. Because then you can mark starting positions and final positions and other things on the floor or on your table, and mom and dad don't get mad at you because this most of the time wipes off no problem, as long as you're not like too hard and scratching stuff. And so as long as you're gentle, chalk comes off and you don't have to worry about that. So I sent everybody home with chalk. If you're ever at IKEA, grab a handful of these bad boys, which are those rulers. So then everybody has a meter stick or a ruler at home now, which works out really nicely in physics, because then I'm building a roller coaster. Because they're bendy, I can actually measure like the distance of my roller coasters in the energy labs, or circumferences of circles or anything like that that's not like a nice flat surface. What I'll do is I'll just have them tape this down. So I do include tape as well. Tape this down on like their ramp or whatever. So then they always have a distance marking in their lab. So say I was doing like rolling something down a ramp. And so then essentially I would have this taped down in the frame, and then they would do a slow-mo cam version, like of watching from above as something moves down a ramp. And now you've got your position data, and then your slow-mo cam video will have your time data. And then you've got everything you need at a pretty accurate level to do at home motion down a ramp stuff. A couple other things, obviously, you're going to need some kind of like bouncy balls or anything like this. So there's party packs from Amazon. You get like 100 of them for like $18. And so then they can use these for doing like collisions, momentum, dropping for energy stuff, rolling down ramps, you name it. And I included marbles too, so that they had like multiple masses and multiple sizes and multiple materials, so we can do all that kind of fun stuff. And then the last hack that I wanted to share, oh, sorry, two more. One more, embroidery floss is dirt cheap, and then that's a string for them to use for doing like labs for like pendulum lab or for pulling things with forces or any of that kind of fun stuff. So embroidery floss is string, super cheap and easy to do. And then last but not least is straws. My favorite lab is the MacGyver pan flute. I don't know if you guys have made that one before. So in open air columns, I'll give the kids the frequencies of an octave. You can make an estimate of the temperature of your room based off of what your thermostat's set to at that time. So using that, crunch the data, figure out what lengths your air columns have to be, snip them off, tape them together, and then you've got yourself a little like pan flute that actually plays like a legit octave. And it's really hilarious and cheap and easy. So I sent straws home with the kids too. And sorry, just because we have a little bit of time still, and I know I'm racing through this, and all this is included in a doc that Adam's going to share with you later, so you can see my materials list later. I did little elastic bands, and, or sorry, little, this is an eraser cut in half. And then I also included paper clips. And then with this embroidery floss, we can recreate circular motion because they can run their embroidery floss through their straw, little eraser on the end, and they're whipping stuff around their heads for circular motion. So that's good to go. And then the last one is I included like a handful of elastic bands, because you can do a Hooke's Law lab where you can hang weights. If you need known masses, you can hang water. So like a cup with like known volumes of water to get an increased mass as you like stretch your elastic out. Or you can also hang coins, because coins have a known value. So you could like tape like quarters together. So you could hang 5 quarters and then 10 quarters or whatever. So then you can get your like elastic force for your elastic band. And now I can turn it horizontally and measure the stretch. So now I can do like force of friction labs and all that kind of fun stuff. So I end up doing Hooke's Law as part of my grade 11 course, just so that I can actually get into some cool force activities at home. So essentially, that is a quick rundown of a bunch of the stuff that I included in kits this year for my kids, so that they can still do physics at home and have hands-on stuff. And then we'll follow that up then with, if I need to, more accurate demos or FET labs or any of that other kind of fun stuff to kind of just bring it all together. So anyway, that's my little ditty for today. And if you have any questions, let me know. And thanks for taking the time to hang out with me tonight. And I don't see any questions in the chat. So Chris, I believe that means you are up.
Yes, thank you very much, Ashley. Just switching over the technological point of view here. Okay, so I hope everybody's able to see me there now. So yeah, thank you very much for coming this evening. This is an experiment for all of us, and I hope you're finding it useful so far. And I just want to reiterate Ashley's point there, the value of the hands-on activities for our students, regardless of the circumstances that we're in. Just one anecdote, just last week, we were measuring the height of the stairway in our school, and multiple students did exactly this, right? They had the long measuring tape, and they looked at it and they said, oh, it's 9 feet tall. And I was like, what language are you speaking? Huh? 9 feet tall, what? And then eventually they figured out, oh, if you look on the other side of the tape measure, there's a whole other set of units there. And then they would look at it at the top, and they would say, oh, it's 80 centimeters tall. More than one student did this. And so, what? 80 centimeters, that's like this. And they looked at it again, it says 80. And then, the wheels were turning and oh, it was 2 meters and 80 centimeters tall. So those experiences are very valuable. And the students who did that, they were of all different mark levels in the course. And these are future engineers as well. So having those experiences is extremely valuable for our students. So I want to switch into our main event now, which is my presentation on cooperative group learning in COVID times. So if some of you are familiar with what I've been doing over the last while, you'll know that cooperative group learning is a really important part of the way that we teach physics at my school. And so I wanted to share with you our experiences in getting this going in these very unusual circumstances. So let's start by taking a look at, sorry, I'm just double checking my technology here. So let's start by taking a look at the problem. So I wanted to reproduce the high quality cooperative group learning that we normally have, both online and in person with all the various COVID restrictions that we have in place. And here are the constraints that we're working with at my school. So I know everybody's school board is doing different things. So just a quick highlight of what we're doing here in Toronto. So we have in the morning a very long in-person class for half of the students of the course. And then the other half of that cohort of students is working at home, supposedly independently. And we have tweaked that. So what they're doing is following exactly what we are doing in the class with the in-person group. And then a couple days later, we see those students again for strictly online lessons in the afternoon. So that's what we're dealing with in Toronto. And so what I want to share with you are the different pieces that make up the solution that we've put together for effectively using groups in these circumstances. So the first step in this is training the students to work in their online groups. And on the first day of class, and our first classes, just the way the schedule happened to work out, they were the virtual afternoon sessions. So in those sessions, I wanted them working in their groups as soon as possible. And then we can start to practice the appropriate behaviors and learning strategies. So just a bit about my physical setup in the classroom. What I don't like doing is what I'm doing right now, which is just having my voice come through Cyberspace over top of the presentation that I'm delivering. I prefer to have one computer, so you can probably see the distant computer by the door. That's kind of running the show there. And I have another computer, which is standing on top of a ring clamp on a retort stand. Excuse me. And that's actually taking I'm using the webcam off of that to record me in front of the screen. That way I can point at things and talk. And I want the students to see me as I'm doing this. So this is what I do for my afternoon virtual classes. So we met there on our first day, and what I'm sharing with you here are excerpts from the PowerPoints that I put together for our first 2 virtual lessons. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but I have the whole PowerPoints available for you to peruse later on once we post our resources. So day 1, right from the start, we introduce ourselves and then we go through how to use our Google Meets program. So I try to lay it out really carefully right from the beginning, not assuming anything from the students. So very quickly, how to use the Google Meet program and what to do if you have problems. And what are my expectations for your behavior in the online format? Because again, I shouldn't assume anything. So very, very quickly with you folks, highlighting that. And then if there's any problems that happen along the way, because I had bad experiences over the summer using a different online platform. So just highlighting what sorts of problems we might have and how we deal with that. And then how to set up your online and learning environment, because there's a physical component to that. So how they should set themselves up at home. And then we get to the really important part. So we're about 10 minutes into our first lesson, and I want to talk to them about how people learn. And people learn best when they are sharing their ideas with one another and they're writing thoughtful explanations. And that's exactly how professional scientists do their job. They're almost always working in teams, collaboratively. So we need to start practicing these habits and behaviors from the earliest points in our students' training. And then I explain to them our usual group work structure. So we have the different roles that the students will perform: the manager, the speaker, the recorder, and the reader. And these roles function just as well in the online world as they do in our regular classes. So we've laid some of the groundwork for how we will be collaborating online, and then I give them their first physics task. So I guess we're about 15 minutes into the first class now. And so they'll be able to look up their group number and their role. They'll find a link to their breakout group in the chat of our Google Meet. And then the instruction, head to your room and introduce yourselves. And then I had more tasks for them to do following that. So I wanted to turn things over as soon as I could, once I'd very carefully laid out the ground rules, so that they could start working together in productive and useful ways. So our first lesson was maybe 45 minutes long. And then day 2, we're ready for what starts as our first heavy lifting. So this is also a totally virtual lesson that we were going through. And you'll find this as well in the slides that I share with you folks. So here we have a full investigation in the style that we've been doing in our classes for many years now. So we have the worksheet, which outlines the questions that the groups will work together collaboratively on. They have the spots where they can sign up for their roles in the group. And in this lesson, in person in class, we would be doing some simple activities and figuring out, what does a recorder do? What does a manager do? And so here, we're trying to do that all virtually. So I give them some quick instructions. So they'll have to go to their Google Classroom and find their assignment, how groups work. They'll get their own sheet, so what you just saw on the previous slide. And then they'll work collaboratively in their breakout groups to answer the questions. And a habit that I'm encouraging them is, recorder, if that's your job today, as your group is getting going, start up a Jamboard and share that with the group. That common workspace is really helpful in the virtual environment. And then when you're done, everybody's submitting their work back to the Google Classroom assignment. And I don't want them to just evaporate into Cyberspace. So just to let me know that they are good. And so this would be about 5 minutes into lesson 2, and off they go onto their first major task, which requires about 45 minutes of just dedicated group work without much intervention from the teacher. So they'll find their lists of names and their roles, and there's a link for each of them to follow, and they head off to their breakout groups. So that's a really quick snapshot of our day 1 and our day 2 physics lessons, which were all 100% virtual. Now, as part of explaining how all of this works, another aspect of successfully using group work is having a high level of structure. So there's really no guessing on what people's responsibilities are or what needs to be done at any time and how they should be doing it. So an important part of this structure for us is having these very structured activity sheets or investigation sheets for the students to work through. So we've been using these for many years in our regular physics classes, and they have been really, really helpful in our online environment. The fact that the lessons are highly structured like this allows the students to go into their groups and do the work. And it means it frees me up as the teacher so that I'm not talking the whole time. I'm there to help them out. But they know what to do. All the tasks are broken down through these series of questions. This is one we did a couple days ago. And so they'll go to the Google Classroom, they'll find the assignment. Because this is a virtual version of it, they might have to look at some videos instead of actually doing the physical experiment. And so we have that all listed out here for them. So again, there's no doubts or questions on what they should be doing. So we get them used to this routine and they just run with it. The homework as well is very structured. It's almost always done on these carefully laid out sheets. So that helps the students to organize their work, but it also really helps me, the teacher, because when I look at their homework, I know exactly where to look on the physical page to find the information that I'm looking for. And that saves me so much time because of the accountability factor here. So the way that we've broken up the work that the students are doing is on a given day, there's at least 2 assignments that they are responsible for submitting. So 2 pieces of work that they're submitting. When we have our long morning classes, there could be 4 because we're essentially doing 2 lessons and 2 pieces of homework. So there's always work that the students are submitting. And the fact that the work is very highly structured allows me to look at it really quickly, but also to spot. I know exactly where to look for the pieces of understanding that are important, and I can spot quickly when students are having difficulties. So this keeps the students on their toes. It keeps them accountable. And I think this is a really important part of why our work with groups has been successful. And here's my view inside Google Classroom when I'm looking at the students' assignments. And again, I can see right away in the document, okay, I need to look right there, and I'll see whether or not the student is getting it. And just at a glance, I can see whether or not they've done reasonable work or if they're really, just half-assing it. But because there's such a high level of accountability, that happens extremely rarely. So another important part of this solution is the continuous support that I'm able to provide, because I'm not spending my time delivering the material. The students already get that in the form of those structured investigations. And so even though they have the support of their fellow group members, they're not left fending for themselves within their groups, because they can easily head off in the wrong direction with some of our more challenging physics concepts. So I'm quite busy when they are working virtually in their groups. So the version of Google Meet that we have, that the TDSB has decided to pay for, does not have the breakout rooms. And so we have to do this very crude method, but now I'm quite used to it and it works well for me. So I just have a set of links to the breakout rooms for the different groups. And so I'll just click on it and I'll go visit that group of students. Now, from my regular presentations from the lessons, I often have slides that focus on key ideas. And so if I visit a group, I'll share a slide and I'll say, okay, can your group explain what is this slide showing? And so then we'll talk our way through it. I also have the lesson sheets, the investigation sheets that they're working on in a PDF form. And I'll switch to that. I'll share my screen with them, and then we'll talk our way through a more complicated situation. So you can see me drawing in red there as we work things through together with the group. So I'm trying to provide them with assistance in a variety of ways. And that way they don't feel lost. And the students have really responded to this. At the end of every test that we give them, we always ask them this question on the first test. So what aspect of learning in grade 11 physics helped you the most? And so many students regularly mention the group work. And this time around, they said that exact same thing again. They really appreciate having the groups to work with. Now, in the in-person world, we have to find a way to make the groups work because of the physical considerations because of COVID. And so we carefully laid out the classroom. We added extra tables or extra desks to the end of our fixed tables to provide the group of 4 students with enough space so they can sit and face each other, but have a reasonable distance. And we have to provide them with tools to share because it's really hard to point at the tiny writing on your page. So we leave out our whiteboards and markers so they can easily grab those. but they're not to share those with their neighbors. So we have our used bin where they've finished with the marker and the cloth, the whiteboard, and it goes in there. And just a quick peek at the groups in action. So you can see how they're sitting 3 or 4 people to a group. And unfortunately, the audio for this wasn't coming through Cyberspace, but at least you'll get a bit of a snapshot or a silent moving picture of what it looks like in the classroom. So they're there facing one another. They're talking about the physics ideas, sharing their thoughts with one another. And despite the large separation between them, it actually works. There's fewer kids in the classroom, so it's less noisy than usual. And so they are able to hear each other reasonably well and get their ideas across. So this has been working quite well in the classroom, even though it's a little bit physically awkward because normally we wouldn't be sitting like this and talking with each other from such a distance. So another important piece of the solution to this group work puzzle is the consistency. We do the exact same thing inside of class as outside of class. And so the students become very used to the routine. And the most important reason why all of this works is because it's based in active learning. The students really enjoy this. It's the students who do the talking. And so they are the ones who do the learning. So for all of these reasons, so there's a lot of pieces that go together to create the solution that we've come up with for cooperative group learning. And as we near the end of our first quadmester for some of us, you might be getting to the point where you'll be switching over and starting a new class shortly. Then maybe you can consider trying out the group work yourself. So our students have really enjoyed it. I have found it's very successful for helping them with their physics learning. They're having really good discussions, both online and in person. And I get the sense that they actually really missed that from the experience they had back in the spring. So that is my experience with cooperative group learning and what we've figured out so far. All right, so now I'm just switching back my view so I can see everybody here. Do you folks have any questions about that?
There is a question about how are students writing on the structured PDF handouts when they're working in groups online?
Okay. We started off those first lessons just using Google Docs. And so they would type in the responses to the Google Doc. After they had rotated amongst the day structure into our physical classrooms, then we gave them the handouts. And so they had their package to work from. In other circumstances, we just give the students a PDF, and then they could just enter it into the PDF, write on a tablet version of the PDF. So there's a variety of ways that they complete that work entirely electronically. But by day 3, we have the students in our classroom, and so we give them the physical copies. Yeah, any other questions? So all of the materials from our presentations tonight, we will make available once we have them organized. So you should be seeing something in your email shortly, and also in your chat. Before long, you should be seeing a link to the survey about tonight's webinar experience. So if you do have a moment, please fill that out, and your feedback will help to guide us on our future sessions. So I'll just ask our presenters here. So presenters, do we have any final thoughts to share with the group?
Just thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again. I think we're planning one for early December.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's great to see all of you, even in these small little rectangles.
Thank you.
Good luck in the changeover, everybody.
Yes, good luck.
Good night.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to stick around for a few minutes and chat, it's also good. Bye-bye.
Can I add something? For the people who are using, is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, Melissa, go ahead.
No, somebody asked how to share a handbook, and there are some boards. My board is one of them, who uses Microsoft Office instead of Google Classroom, and part of that whole package comes with Teams. And those people who are using Teams, there is an excellent option which is called Class Notebook, which they can upload the whole handbook, and the students can. Every student will have their own virtual binder in which you can put the handbook, and then they can type, and you as a teacher have access to every student's handbook, and you can see what they wrote and what they typed or what they wrote using their whatever stylus and pen. But for anyone who has Teams, that Class Notebook option is excellent option to keep the track of what students are working. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome feature. Thanks, Melissa. I noticed a question appeared in the chat. Are the students supervised in the chat? Have there been issues inside the breakout rooms? All I can speak is from my experience with grade 11s. And I definitely have not tried this with grade 9s, for example. But the maturity level with my group has been fine, and so I've had no difficulties. I'm always dropping in unannounced into the breakout rooms, and I haven't had difficulties with the behaviors.
Can I just say something there, Chris?
Yeah.
I've done the breakout rooms as well, and at least through Chrome, what I do is there's an extension called Mute Tab. So I join all 7 breakout rooms simultaneously, but put it on Mute Tab. So you don't hear everybody, but you're present in all 7 breakout rooms.
That's cool. I found, like, for breakout rooms for clubs, like, because I'm the advisor for some of our clubs, when we used like non-school-based platforms like Discord or something like that, I found the kids got a little bit squirrely and they got a little like comfortable. But if you're using a platform that's like a school one, then I find they're actually like they behave a little bit better because it's school. So then they behave like they would at school. So that's been our, like, if you stick to the board stuff, then they tend to behave pretty well in the breakout rooms. So.
I can also add my perspective from breakout rooms because I use them every class. So my breakout rooms are actually different group created in teams. And I taught grade 12 physics course, and I've never had a single awkward situation. And I would also go unannounced, and they can also request my presence if they have questions, and that became a usual thing for them to do, to call me whenever they can. And because they're so busy, because they have to deliver a product by the end of the class, and I can see in real time what they are writing in their handbooks as well, if I choose so, then there is that sense of responsibility. So the classroom management, I guess, virtual classroom management is not an issue, at least for the grade 12s that I had this semester.
Yeah, that's a super awesome ability that you can actually see them working through, filling out the investigations as they go. That's cool.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sometimes it takes some time to, like, there is some lag, but definitely it does show up eventually. And what I do is I don't look at all 32 of them every day, but I focus only on specific, on the recorders. So whoever is a recorder for the day, those are the ones that I would go and in their handbooks for that day.
All right, do folks have any other questions while we're all here? All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for dropping by tonight. It's great to see you. Take care. We'll do this again soon.
Thanks. Good night.
Chris, you can probably stop the recording too.
Oh, yeah.
I can see my little recording bloop bloop in the top corner.